And in Lystra a certain man without strength in his feet was sitting, a cripple from his mother's womb, who had never walked. This man heard Paul speaking. Paul, observing him intently, and seeing that he had faith to be healed, said with a loud voice, "Stand up straight on your feet." And he leaped and walked. Now when the people saw what Paul had done, they raised their voices, saying in the Lycaonian language, "The gods have come down to us in the likeness of men." And Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul Hermes, because he was the chief speaker. Then the priest of Zeus, whose temple was in front of their city, brought oxen and garlands to the gates, intending to sacrifice with the multitudes. But when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard this, they tore their clothes and ran in among the multitude, crying out and saying, "Men, why are you doing these things? We also are men with the same nature as you, and preach to you that you should turn from these useless things to the living God, who made the heaven, the earth, the sea, and all things that are in them." Some viewers of this channel have brought up the interesting encounter of Paul and Barnabas, who sought to spread the word of God with the inhabitants of the Asia Minor region of Lycaonia. To the shock and dismay of Paul, the townsfolk react by honoring them as gods. There is a tremendous amount of background in this brief depiction that requires some contextualizing. Fundamental to the issue here, however, is broached by the question asked by the classicist H.S. Versnell. What did the ancient Greeks see when they saw a god? This is an incredibly complex question to directly answer in a few lines, but in this video, I will try my best in providing a list of attested encounters with the gods and goddesses. The first thing to mention is that gods are notoriously difficult to identify. The question of epiphany or divine revealing is never about whether it is in fact a god or a goddess who is present. That's taken for granted. But the issue is the identification of the god present. This is an important question because to know which god or goddess is revealing him or herself to you is to know how to make the appropriate sacrifices and offerings of thanks. Another important point to keep in mind is that there was incredible diversity and wide-ranging manifestation of the gods and cults of the gods that were scattered throughout the Mediterranean on a regional basis. Each region emphasized the cult worship of a particular set of deities, emphasizing some over others, and quite contrary to our modern sensibilities, which seek to clarify through systematization into logical frameworks, the ancient Greeks did not feel this necessity until much, much later. For example, Apollo is understood by us as a human-like form, albeit more beautiful and more powerful. And although Apollo may have many epithets like far shooter or python slayer, we tend to view him as a unity, a single personality. But in reality, Apollo is not simply a unity, although he can be occasionally addressed as one. But each version of Apollo is in fact a different god. There is Apollo Agueus, who is concerned with good fortune, and Apollo Prostaterios, who is concerned with good health. Our tendency is to say that Apollo is in fact a totality, and that all these epithets just simply serve as different instantiations of his powers that manifest in the world. But to the ancient Greeks, this is only half the story. Each god has its own personality and presents itself to its worshippers under the aspect of that particular manifestation. But when one worshipper travels to a different town, they may see a statue dedicated to that locally worshipped Apollo, but will encounter it differently than the Apollo they worship back at home, while at the same time maintaining a level of identity between those two Apollos. As the classicist Michelson remarks, quote, "The deities of Greek poetry, in a sense, both were and were not the deities whom each Greek personally worshipped." This brings up a very interesting twist on our notion of unity versus multiplicity or diversity. With respect to the ancient Greek imagination, the diversity that fosters inconsistencies and blatant contradictions were not seen as embodying a sense of chaos or illogicality. In fact, their existence, according to H.S. Versnell, was tolerated and even favored, as opposed to trying to reduce or iron out the anomalous nature of these powers. Versnell concludes, that the result is not solely unity in diversity, but also unity as diversity. This is not a strictly pagan phenomenon. In fact, it even appears in modern-day Italy, Greece, and Spain. It has been observed across many Christian towns regarding Mary, the Mother of God. W.A. Christian Jr., from an article entitled "The Spanish Shrine," states, quote, "The Church maintains that there is only one Mary, that all representations of her are interchangeable. But devotions have crystallized around different representations, a manifestation of the inevitable problem of localization. The parishes, with specific shrine images, countered the universalist impulse by diversifying the image of Mary. As a result, even though the same divine figure reigned everywhere, the symbols for different communities were distinctive, and each community could be said to have its own Mary." With the abundance of gods, it sometimes becomes a challenge in identifying which god is currently present or revealing itself in an epiphany. The word epiphaneia not only demonstrates a display of divine powers, but also can show itself as a miraculous healing or a rescue from dangerous situations. For example, the healing cures of Asclepius, or Athena's intervention during the conflict between Achilles and Agamemnon, where, quote, "she stood behind him and seized the son of Peleus by his fair hair, appearing to him alone. No one of the others saw her. Achilles was seized with wonder and turned around and immediately recognized Pallas Athena. Terribly, her eyes shone." What is crucial to understand in this phenomenon of epiphaneia is that there need not be a visual appearance of the god or goddess. After all, we have 5 senses, and although our sense of sight is one of our most highly utilized organs of perception, the ancients perceived the world in a significantly richer way using multiple senses. Perhaps one has to step away from their immediate daily experience of sanitized life to drift back in memory to the past, to imagine walking in the streets of a marketplace where one would encounter the stench of animal feces, the iron smell of spilt blood at the butcher's, the smell of myrrh and frankincense and all sorts of resins and sacrificial meat burning in the smallest altars to the largest temples. The rich and costly perfumes of ladies walking by mingled with the pungent smell of body odor and sweat from the laborers and slaves. The smell of perfumes and incense and beautiful fragrances were also a sign of the presence of the divinities. This can be seen to the present day in Sufi practices, where the opening of the sense of smell can indicate the nearness and presence of either heaven or of Shaitan, Satan. This sense of smell is given off by the spiritual quality of things and people, and the soul can perceive it through the odors emitted. There are a multitude of ways in which the gods manifest themselves. They can appear in animal or human form, for example in the healing sanctuary at Epidaurus where Asclepius resides. The suppliant enters the temple for healing, specifically through incubation, in the hopes of receiving a healing dream. If you dream of a snake or a young man touching the part of your body requiring healing, then that is a sure sign that Asclepius has come to cure you. But if you happen to pray for healing elsewhere, the vision of a dream or of a snake could be the sign of Zeus Melicios as well. The ambiguity of a god's epiphaneia and its revealing to a human is not simply an issue faced by those who embody a polytheistic worldview, as Odysseus complains to Athena, quote, "Hard is it, goddess, for a mortal man to know you when he meets you, for you take whatever shape you will." But this difficulty also confronted St. Paul on his road to Damascus. In Acts 9, 3-5, as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly a light shone around him from heaven. Then he fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And he said, "Who are you, Lord?" It is debated whether St. Paul saw a personal manifestation and therefore addressed it with a question, or whether it was specifically the phenomenon of the light that shone around him that prompted him to address the unknown or unseen presence. But regardless of whether St. Paul received a clear vision or not of the Lord, the fact remains that he sensed or felt a presence and was not able to recognize who or what it was, and therefore addressed it, hoping to find out its identity. This is yet another way by which the ancients perceived the presence of the gods, through the radiance of light. Other signs are of course sweet-smelling fragrance, the sound of their voices, their physical size, the types of miracles they perform, and their otherworldly beauty. Another manner by which they appeared is through images, phasmata or idola or phantasiae. These are commonly seen as operating on a mental or psychic level. Many of these images occur in dreams, but not exclusively. Even in one's waking state, such images or apparitions can appear. It is our modern prejudice against imagination that we take these as simply optical illusions or sensory stimuli being accidentally triggered. But the most common way in which the gods can be perceived is through the intermediary state between waking and sleeping. The famous dream collector Artemidorus distinguished between three classifications of gods: those who could be perceived through the physical senses, the epigeioi, or terrestrial gods like Hecate and Pan; the aesthetoi, who could be perceived through the five senses, where we derive our term for aesthetics; and the noetoi, those who could only be perceived through the intellect alone. It is these latter types of gods where visions and dreams reveal the phasmata. Once again, let me stress that these are classifications, mainly artificially contrived, and need not reflect how the folk viewed the nature of the gods and their appearances. Similar to the ancient Mesopotamians who viewed dreams as real events, it is important to consider that an image or an idola is not simply how we understand the word illusion to mean. We tend to think of illusory things or illusions as somehow not true or not real. But the very fact of its appearing to us as an illusion necessitates its existence on some level. Illusions are images, and images exist. Therefore, illusions exist. And for something to exist, it must be included in the real or reality. Imagine someone asserting that illusions are not real. That would imply that it does not participate in reality, that it does not in fact exist. But the very fact that you have perceived an image, that you subsequently attributed a value judgment to it, whether it's true or not true, does not alter the ultimate fact that you saw what you saw, whether it was verifiably there or not. It was there, and that's why you saw it. Gods can also be perceived through the temple and local cult statues in whose form they took. This is a very thorny, much misunderstood, and much more maligned topic regarding worship of idols and the debate between iconoclasm and iconodualism. Let's save that for another video. For now, let me mention that Plutarch refers to a theurgic practice whereby the theurgist stares with fixed attention and concentration on the statue of a god or goddess to bring themselves into a state whereby they can detect the subtle movements and the oracular decrees of the god being observed. There is a synthesis or alignment between the observer and the observed that reflects back upon the person when this is performed appropriately. Herodotus also speaks of the summoning of the gods, involving the physical relocation of the god's statuary to a specific place of offering. This ambiguous and difficult attempt to identify a god, as in the case of St. Paul, was understood as expressing a sense of humility. As Versenal states, quote, "This is not a defective insight into identity of a deity, but articulates the inscrutable magnitude of supreme divine power which cannot be captured in one name. If a worshipper wanted to know which god he should address for a particular issue or wish, he or she would consult an oracle. Some expressions of uncertainty would be, quote, 'Whichever god it may be that lives in this place,' or 'Listen to me, Lord, whoever you may be.' In fact, in Athens, Paul famously preached at the temple of the unknown god, the agnosto theo. But the authentic dedications are in the plural, as Jerome notes in his work entitled Commentarorium in Epistulam ad Titum Liber. His quote is as follows: "The altar inscription is not, as Paul asserted, to an unknown god, but as follows: to the gods of Asia, Europe, and Africa, to the unknown and foreign gods." This desire not to leave out worship to any of the gods not named or known is a very palpable expression of reverence and piety, and also quite common in Roman practices where anonymous gods were also honored. It is also telling that many gods of the underworld were also collectively referred to as the anonymoi and given due honor and respect, especially since their names were not known. To finally return to our initial scenario of Paul and Barnabas being perceived as Hermes and Zeus, respectively, by the people of Lycaonia, we must first understand what they were witnessing. As is clear from the book of Acts, Paul is the predominant preacher and speaker, and that attribute is very much the quality of Hermes. The miraculous deed of healing the crippled man is also a sign of a god's presence, along with the speaking of magical words of power. So it is no surprise that as two strangers appear in the land performing feats typically indicative of gods, that they would associate them with the identity of Hermes and Zeus. But why Zeus, you may ask? Well, prior to the establishment of this traveling divine duo of Zeus and Hermes, as can also be seen in Ovid's tale involving their visit to the home of Philemon and Bacchus, the local Lycaonian gods were originally a non-Greek divine couple, who only later became identified with the Olympian divinities.
The Lycaonian people were in the dark as to the identity of these miracle workers. All they knew was that these two strangers satisfied their criteria for the manifestation of divinity, which in this case happened to have a strong precedent, that is, the local representation and legends of a pair of non-Greek gods who would have appeared together in visions experienced by the locals themselves countless times in the past. The assumed identity of the traveling Zeus and his messenger Hermes was quite an appropriate mythological framework to project and resolve this ambiguity. This was not naivete on the part of the Lycaonians, nor credulous deifying of the merely human form. What we find here is complexity, and a certain complicated logic that informed their behaviors on that fateful day in Asia Minor. In accordance with the customs of piety and reverence owing to a god, they were doing their utmost to give honor and a warm welcome to mysterious strangers. Take care for now.